Charlie Kirk, Utah Valley University, and a sniper's deadly precision. This is the story of a political rally that turned into a nightmare, leaving a nation shocked, a campus in chaos, and a mystery that refuses to be solved. On a bright spring morning, the campus of Utah Valley University was alive with activity. The air carried a crisp freshness, and the sun reflected off the modern glass buildings, casting long shadows across the walkways where students hurried to their classes. On this particular day, however, the usual campus rhythm was overshadowed by anticipation. News had spread that Charlie Kirk, a prominent and controversial political figure, would be speaking at the university. The announcement had drawn attention from far beyond the campus borders. Local residents, media crews, and political enthusiasts converged on the university, hoping to witness a historic event. The atmosphere was electric, yet under the excitement, a quiet tension lingered. Security had been heightened for weeks in preparation for the rally. Metal detectors were installed at every entrance, uniformed guards patrolled the grounds, and plainclothes officers mingled with the crowd. The university administration had insisted that every precaution be taken. Attendees went through strict checks, bags were scanned, and questions were asked about the origins of personal items. Yet despite these measures, whispers circulated among students and staff. Some spoke of past threats aimed at high-profile speakers, while others worried about the unpredictability of large gatherings. Few expected that their concerns would soon turn out to be tragically valid. As the morning progressed, lines formed outside the main auditorium. Excitement mixed with nerves as people discussed Kirk's past speeches, speculating about what he might say. Cameras and recording equipment were set up, news crews capturing footage of students waving, banners being unfurled, and the crowd steadily growing. Social media posts flooded the internet with photos and videos, each sharing the anticipation in real time. From a distance, the scene appeared vibrant and orderly, yet a sense of unease lingered beneath the surface, a feeling that would soon prove all too accurate. Inside the auditorium, seats were filling quickly. Attendees whispered to one another, trying to catch glimpses of event staff and security personnel preparing for the entrance of the speaker. The stage was set with a large podium, lights angled perfectly, and cameras positioned to capture every angle. From the front row to the back, anticipation was palpable. People adjusted their phones, preparing to record the moment that had brought them here. Then, as the clock ticked closer to the scheduled start, an unusual silence seemed to descend. Conversations quieted, phones were lowered, and all eyes turned to the stage. When Charlie Kirk finally stepped onto the platform, the auditorium erupted with applause. The crowd cheered, raised their phones, and recorded the moment as history in the making. For a brief instant, it seemed like a routine political rally, a gathering of supporters and curious onlookers. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed through the room. The sound was sharp, piercing, and immediately recognizable as a gunshot. Panic rippled through the audience. People screamed, ducked under seats, and rushed toward exits. The orderly atmosphere disintegrated into chaos within seconds. Emergency alarms blared, and staff shouted instructions, trying to guide students and attendees to safety. Cameras continued to record, capturing the confusion, fear, and disbelief that had replaced the initial excitement. In those moments, no one could comprehend the scale of what had just occurred. The rally, meant to be a platform for discussion and engagement, had become a scene of terror. The chaos spread like wildfire, and the realization that this was not an accident but a calculated act began to take hold. Security personnel rushed to respond, cordoning off areas, checking for additional threats, and attempting to restore order. Amid the screaming and commotion, the first responders arrived, their presence a small comfort against the overwhelming fear. The day that had begun with promise and anticipation was now forever marked by tragedy. The moments following the gunshot were surreal, a blur of panic and confusion that seemed to stretch endlessly. students, faculty, and attendees scattered in every direction, many tripping over chairs and bags in their desperate bid to escape. The sound of sirens outside mingled with the screams, creating a chaotic symphony of fear that echoed through the auditorium. Some people pressed themselves against walls, covering their heads and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Others instinctively looked around for the shooter, but all they could see were shadows, movements, and the occasional flash of light from cameras or phones recording the horror. Amid the chaos, university security moved with precision, guiding the crowd toward emergency exits and performing quick sweeps of the area. Officers coordinated with local police, establishing a perimeter and searching for any signs of additional danger. Despite the training and preparation, even they struggled to contain the panic. Witnesses later described a sense of disbelief hanging in the air, a feeling that what they had just experienced was impossible, yet undeniable. The sound of the single gunshot had shattered the sense of normalcy, replacing it with a suffocating tension that seemed to seep into every corner of the auditorium. Charlie Kirk had been hit almost instantly. Those closest to the stage tried to shield him, but the attack had been executed with precision and planning. First responders arrived within minutes, carefully navigating the panicked crowd to reach him. Paramedics assessed his condition and worked frantically to stabilize him before transporting him to a nearby hospital. The ride was tense and silent, punctuated only by the steady beeping of medical monitors and the rush of traffic outside. Every second counted, but even the most experienced medical teams sensed the grim reality of the situation. Investigators later determined that the attack had been carried out by a sniper positioned at a calculated distance from the auditorium. The angle, timing, and choice of weapon suggested meticulous planning. Every detail, from the trajectory of the bullet to the location of exits and security personnel, had been considered. The shooter had remained hidden, escaping detection in the chaos that followed, leaving only a trail of questions and fear. Surveillance footage captured fleeting glimpses of a figure retreating, disappearing into a network of alleys and side streets, vanishing almost as if they had never been there. The aftermath was immediate and far-reaching. News outlets reported the attack within minutes, flooding television screens and social media feeds with breaking updates. Students and faculty grappled with the reality that their campus, usually a place of learning and debate, had become the site of a political assassination. Families scrambled to find information about loved ones, while first responders continued to manage the scene, ensuring that no further threats remained. Investigators combed the auditorium for clues, recovering fragments of evidence that hinted at a level of organization far beyond a spontaneous act. Bullet fragments, partial surveillance images, and traces of tactical equipment suggested that this was not the act of a lone individual acting on impulse, but the culmination of careful, deliberate planning. In those early hours, the world watched in horror and disbelief. The attack had shattered a sense of safety, leaving a community grappling with grief and confusion. The initial shock soon gave way to questions that would dominate headlines for weeks. Who had orchestrated the attack? Why had they chosen this target? And how had someone managed to bypass the layers of security? The answers were not immediately clear, but one truth was undeniable. The ordinary day that had begun with excitement and anticipation had been irrevocably transformed into a night of tragedy, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had been present. The investigation began almost immediately, with local law enforcement and the FBI converging on Utah Valley University to piece together what had happened. The campus was sealed off, every hallway, classroom, and stairwell meticulously examined for clues. Forensic teams moved methodically, photographing every angle, collecting fragments of bullet casings, and dusting for fingerprints. The sniper's precision had left little physical evidence behind, but investigators were determined to follow every lead, no matter how small. Students and staff were interviewed repeatedly, their recollections pieced together to reconstruct the chaotic moments of the shooting. Each account added layers to the understanding of the event, yet no single witness had a clear view of the shooter, and the picture remained incomplete. One of the first breakthroughs came from surveillance footage surrounding the campus. A dark-colored van had been parked on a nearby street for hours before the rally began. Its windows were tinted, and its license plates had been deliberately altered. Analysts noted that the van's location provided an unobstructed line of sight to the auditorium, making it a potential observation point for the sniper. Attempts to trace the vehicle's registration initially led to dead ends, suggesting the involvement of someone experienced in evading detection. Digital forensics teams began combing through social media posts, messages, and public forums for any mention of the event, hoping to uncover chatter that could indicate planning or coordination. As investigators dug deeper, evidence began to hint at a broader conspiracy. Encrypted messages were discovered on the dark web, discussing high-profile political figures and potential targets. While the messages were vague in some ways, the language and references suggested that the attack had not been the work of a lone individual. Analysts recognized patterns consistent with extremist networks, including discussions of timing, escape routes, and avoiding law enforcement detection. The more investigators uncovered, the more they realized the complexity of the operation. It was no longer just an assassination. It was part of a calculated strategy executed with chilling precision. Witness testimonies also began to reveal inconsistencies in the event's planning. Some security personnel admitted to receiving unusual instructions in the days leading up to the rally, including changes in seating arrangements, unexplained alterations in access points, and last-minute adjustments to schedules. Investigators considered the possibility of an inside collaborator, someone who may have provided critical information to the shooter. The idea was unsettling. The notion that the event had been compromised from within shook the confidence of both law enforcement and the university community. Public interest in the case surged. News outlets ran constant updates, and social media became flooded with speculation, theories, and claims of responsibility, most of which were unfounded. The investigation required sifting through misinformation while maintaining focus on credible evidence. As days turned into weeks, the task force expanded, bringing in behavioral analysts, cybercrime experts, and specialists in counterterrorism. Every lead was examined, every fragment of evidence scrutinized. Despite the extensive resources dedicated to the case, progress was slow. The sniper's skill, combined with careful planning and possible insider assistance, made the crime exceptionally difficult to solve. The city, the university, and the nation watched anxiously, aware that each new discovery could reshape their understanding of what had truly occurred on that tragic day. Months into the investigation, a series of breakthroughs began to shed light on the complex web behind the attack. Forensic experts had traced the sniper rifle used in the assassination to a private collector who maintained connections with several extremist groups. The collector, known for dealing in rare firearms, had previously been linked to politically motivated violence in other states. The rifle itself bore signs of modification, indicating that the shooter had ensured maximum accuracy and range. Ballistics tests confirmed that the weapon was capable of striking targets from the distance observed, reinforcing the conclusion that this was a meticulously planned assassination rather than a spontaneous act. Digital forensics provided additional clues. Investigators had been sifting through encrypted communications found on the dark web, and patterns began to emerge. Messages indicated coordination between multiple individuals, with discussions about timing, crowd management, and methods of escape. Analysts identified references to previous attacks and logistical strategies that suggested the shooter had studied law enforcement procedures carefully. The level of planning implied months, if not years, of preparation, turning what had initially seemed like a sudden, isolated act into the work of an organized group with extensive resources. Perhaps most disturbing was evidence pointing to insider involvement. Security logs and internal emails revealed that certain event protocols had been inexplicably altered in the weeks leading up to the rally. Access points had been left unmonitored at critical times, surveillance cameras were temporarily disabled or repositioned, and seating arrangements had been adjusted in ways that coincidentally exposed the target. Investigators theorized that someone within the organizing team may have provided crucial intelligence to the assailants, enabling them to exploit vulnerabilities in security. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case, suggesting that the conspiracy reached far beyond the visible perpetrators. As authorities dug deeper, they uncovered a network of individuals with ties to extremist ideologies and political intimidation. Background checks and financial records revealed connections between several suspects and clandestine organizations known for targeting public figures. Travel logs and online activity indicated coordination across state lines, reinforcing the theory that this was not an isolated attack but part of a larger agenda. The investigation began to uncover the hidden infrastructure supporting such operations, including surveillance equipment, communication networks, and safe houses used to plan and execute high-profile attacks. Each new discovery intensified the sense of unease among the public and within the law enforcement community. The attack, once thought to be the act of a single sniper, was now understood as a carefully orchestrated event, made possible through collaboration, deception, and months of preparation. Investigators faced the daunting challenge of untangling a complex web of individuals, networks, and motives, while the nation grappled with the reality that a trusted public space had been compromised. Every revelation raised further questions about who was truly responsible, how they had managed to operate undetected, and what their ultimate goals might have been. The unfolding story painted a chilling portrait of precision, planning, and betrayal, deepening the mystery and setting the stage for the final chapter of the investigation. The aftermath of the assassination sent shockwaves far beyond the campus of Utah Valley University. The nation was gripped by a mixture of grief, fear, and outrage as news outlets broadcast the tragedy repeatedly, showing footage of the chaotic moments during the rally and images of emergency responders working frantically. Public officials condemned the attack, and conversations about security at political events reached a fever pitch. The university itself became a focal point for intense scrutiny, with questions about how such a meticulously planned act could have occurred despite extensive security measures. Students and staff were left traumatized, many struggling to comprehend the scale of the violence they had witnessed firsthand. Law enforcement continued to work tirelessly to unravel the layers of the conspiracy. Multiple arrests were made, targeting individuals with connections to extremist networks and the distribution of encrypted instructions. Some were directly implicated in planning, while others were suspected of supplying materials or information. Yet despite these arrests, the mastermind remained elusive. Investigators traced financial transactions, communications, and movements of known suspects. But the figure who had orchestrated the attack with surgical precision had anticipated many of the conventional investigative methods, leaving behind almost no trace. The ongoing challenge of locating this individual frustrated authorities and heightened public concern. The revelation of a possible insider involved in the event further complicated the narrative. Security personnel and university staff were scrutinized, and internal audits were conducted to determine if information had been leaked intentionally. This discovery sparked distrust within the university community, leaving faculty and administrators questioning the loyalty of colleagues and students alike. The thought that someone within the organization had contributed to such a violent act shook the foundation of campus life, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and uncertainty that lingered long after the initial attack. Public reaction was intense and varied. Vigils were held to honor the life of Charlie Kirk, with thousands attending to show solidarity and demand justice. Social media erupted with speculation, theories, and debates about motive, responsibility, and the broader implications of political violence. Protesters and supporters clashed in online forums and in person, reflecting a society grappling with the shocking reality of targeted assassination in a public space. The event became a reference point for discussions about national security, extremism, and the vulnerability of public figures in an increasingly polarized environment. As months passed, the investigation continued, revealing some answers but leaving critical questions unresolved. Experts analyzed the techniques used in the attack, assessing both the planning and execution to prevent similar incidents in the future. Security protocols at universities and public events were revised nationwide, with greater emphasis on intelligence gathering, threat assessment, and the detection of insider threats. Despite these measures, the ultimate questions about the identity and motive of the primary orchestrator remained unanswered. The assassination left a permanent mark on the community and the nation, a grim reminder of the dangers that can lurk in public spaces. The tragedy transformed how people viewed political gatherings, personal safety, and trust, leaving a haunting legacy that would continue to influence security practices, public discourse, and collective memory for years to come.